Good morning. The first reading for today is from Wendell Berry, and it's from his work Leavings. It is hard to have hope. It is harder as you grow old, for hope must not depend on feeling good. And there's the dream of loneliness at absolute midnight. You also have withdrawn belief in the present reality of the future, which surely will surprise us. And hope is harder when it cannot come by prediction any more than by wishing. But stop dithering. The young ask the old to hope. What will you tell them? Tell them at least what you say to yourself. Because we have not made our lives to fit our places. The forests are ruined, the fields eroded, the streams polluted, the mountains overturned. Hope then to belong to your place by your own knowledge of what it is that no other place is, and by your caring for it as you care for no other place. This place that you belong to, though it is not yours, for it was from the beginning and will be to the end. Listen privately, silently to the voices that rise up from the pages of books and from your own heart. Be still and listen to the voices that belong to the stream banks and the trees and the open fields. There are songs and sayings that belong to this place, by which it speaks for itself and no other. The second reading then comes from Rebecca Solnit, and it's from her work, The Faraway Nearby. I told the students that they were at the age when they might begin to choose places that would sustain them the rest of their lives, that places were far more reliable than human beings and often much longer lasting, and I asked them where they felt at home. So, hello everyone. We are not in the space together, but I'm imagining that we are. I'm imagining that I am in that beautiful, well-lit space in Ephraim, and that many of you are sitting there with me, and hope that that will actually be a reality in the not too distant future. So the title of my message today is Spirituality and a Sense of Place. The Pacific island nation of Kiribati is likely going to be one of the first nations to disappear in the 21st century due to ocean levels rising as a result of global climate change. Climate activist Selena Leem from the Marshall Islands realized that when she saw waves crashing on her grandparents' graves, that the world had already given up on her home. Those far away were assuming that she and those she loved and all the places she loved were unfortunate casualties of decades-long decisions elsewhere. In Louisiana, the most recent home for the last several hundred years of the Isle de Jean Charles band of the Biloxi, Titimacha, Choctaws has shrunk from 35 square miles to half a square mile in the last 20 years. Another parish in Louisiana, Plaquemines, has the distinction of being among the fastest disappearing places on earth. Everyone who lives in the parish, and fewer people do, can point to some stretch of water that used to have a house or a hunting camp on it. It's true even of teenagers. A few years ago, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration officially retired 31 Plaquemines place names. There is no there anymore. And what's happening to Plaquemines is happening all along the coast. Since the Great Depression, Louisiana has shrunk by more than 2,000 square miles. If Delaware or Rhode Island lost that much territory, the U.S. would have only 49 states. My message today is about the dilemma that those on Kiribati and in Louisiana and in many places on the planet face that some of us cannot readily relate to. And because we cannot relate to it, I want to make a case that we are deeply impoverished, spiritually weakened as a result. The obvious solution to the fact that in a decade or two one's home will be covered in water is to move. But it's only an obvious solution to us because we do not live there. For the people of Kiribati and the Isle de Jean Charles and the vast majority of the world's population, where one lives matters very, very deeply. For most of the world's population, this process of developing a sense of place, it occurs naturally. The Apache of the North American Southwest remember history through the landscape, and they have morality tales that are connected to the land. The landscape regulates their behavior in a variety of ways. Anthropologist Keith Basso notes that for the Apache, human beings need long-term histories associated with previous people's experiences on the landscape to help guide personal growth and maintain society. Basso recounts brief encounters between a distraught or errant member of the community and elder members of the community. The elders use place names such as where the water runs between two white rocks to help the afflicted recover emotionally from a problem. The place name evokes a picture, an associated story, and a moral. But they don't spend that much time on the stories because each place name is dense with emotional and cultural wisdom. The landscape then becomes the repository for the society's wisdom and experience. While grandmothers and uncles must perish, the landscape endures, and for this, the Apache are grateful. Placemaking is a universal tool. I saw it in action in Tanzania, where I lived for several years, and the Aborigines in Australia use it as well. Today, I want to explore the role that possessing or developing a sense of place can play in one's spirituality and well-being for us non-Apache. Developing a sense of place offers one an opportunity, an essential spiritual opportunity, to be part of something far grander and far more absorbing than an individual life, or anything of solely human construction. I come to this topic as an adult who has rediscovered something some of you might take for granted. I moved to 3 states and 3 different parts of the country by the time I was 12, as my father received promotions in the U.S. Forest Service. The longest I've ever lived in one place is in Cincinnati, where I've been for 23 years. My first child, a son, was born in Madison. He was 6 months old when I moved to Cincinnati to take a job at Xavier University. Like most new parents, we were clueless and idealistic. We wanted to ensure an optimal future for our son and then later our daughter. And that included optimal health. When we read about the hormones and antibiotics in cow's milk, we decided we were willing to pay more for organic milk. Then a friend told us where we could get organic vegetables from a local community-supported agriculture initiative, or CSA. We signed up, agreeing to work 1 hour a week for 22 weeks in exchange for a share of fresh vegetables. A few years later, we doubled our work at the CSA for twice the produce for our growing family. We were really surprised how many vegetables our children ate while we worked. They pulled peas, tomatoes, carrots right out of the ground or off the plant, made a slight attempt to get the dirt off, and chomped away. This was one of our first lessons in a sense of place. These vegetables were more interesting because our children knew where they came from. A particular plant, in a particular patch of soil, in a particular row, in a particular field. They could tell you that they were way better than the carrots that came from the store. Several years later, when the farm started a meat and egg CSA, we joined. We fed and watered sheep, cattle, pigs, and chickens year-round. I still do. For 10 years, we milked a cow once a week. When the kids first tasted that raw, fat-filled milk that came out of that Jersey cow, they loved it. This work and these commitments grew out of a desire to feed our growing children and ourselves the healthiest food possible. Over time, however, our commitments began to mean more to us than just a supply of healthy food, just as they did for our children as well. That farm became a place, a specific place. We often biked there from our house, a distance of 4.5 miles one way, and have many memories of the children gradually getting there under their own power instead of ours. We recall carrying vegetables home in side bags on our bikes, kale riding atop potatoes, and tomatoes carefully stashed so as not to bruise. But mostly we remember working side by side with other CSA members in the fields, sneaking in a late evening swim in the pond after an excruciatingly hot day, and eating dinner with several other families after the chores were over. We all worked together and then pulled our potluck offering from the car, set it on the picnic table below the persimmon tree, and dug in hungrily. The rhythm of the seasons, from the early planting of radishes and greens to the late spring planting of tomatoes and squash, the short bursts of vegetable readiness, peas for only a few weeks, tomatoes for a month or more, but Swiss chard forever, became part of our rhythm. We came to love that place. We still do. Colin worked there for 4 summers, and as I was beginning to write this sermon, one of the farm workers sent me an email asking for Colin's address so they could send him a college graduation gift and card. He left there 4 years ago. It's that kind of community and that kind of place. And as a result, I am totally in love with where I live. And it matters if we love where we live in a particular granular way. The kind of rocks that appear on the landscape, the moths that frequent the lights at night, the kinds of food that can be grown there and maybe nowhere else. In her book, A Sense of Wonder, environmentalist Rachel Carson expresses the wish that all children should gain a sense of wonder so indestructible that it would last throughout life, as an unfailing antidote against the boredom and disenchantment of later years, the sterile preoccupation with things that are artificial, the alienation from the sources of our strength. Carson also notes that as adults, those who dwell among the beauties and mysteries of the earth are never alone or weary of life. People who feel a sense of wonder, Carson argues, will love the places where they live and seek to ensure their integrity. Our society values mobility. It's possible, and in some circles at least expected, that one will move multiple times in a lifetime. But such mobility comes at a cost. And it is that cost that I want to call our attention to today. Of course, one can establish a connection even if one moves. I'm an example of doing so, and I suspect some of you are as well. I think that there's an unexpected, perhaps even culturally ironic result that occurs when we purposely limit our investigations and connections to a place that beckons us by foot, or that is circumscribed by a local economy, or by neighborliness, or some other metric that is not necessarily car-dependent, exotic, or a tourist highlight. We discover that all of our places have landscapes that are precious, plants that are beautiful, wildlife that is amazing, water and soil that is essential to life. Our places need us, and we need them. I'm almost done, but let me share with you one final story that points to the kinds of reorienting I'm arguing need to take place and that will benefit us and the earth. I had been at Xavier for about 8 or 9 years when I was invited to have lunch with a guest speaker on campus, a man by the name of David Klein. I had not heard of him. He is an Amish farmer and writer. He gave one of the most interesting and wide-ranging talks I'd ever heard up to that point, and emphasized that he had only had an 8th grade education, because that's all any Amish receive. To receive more, and he really did want to receive more, would have meant giving up his Amish community, so he was largely self-taught. But the point of the story comes next. Before lunch, his host was introducing him to me and said something like, "This is Kathleen Smythe. She teaches African history here and is about to take 10 students to Ghana, West Africa." I think the host thought David would be impressed. But there was a long pause. When David spoke, he said, "There are 3 places, within 6 miles of where I live, that I have yet to visit." His was a blunt way of encouraging me to introduce students to the treasures of the world closer to home. I did not start off with an agenda to develop a sense of place. I started off with an agenda to feed my family well, better than our industrialized agricultural system could, and quickly realized that the landscapes I was in were feeding me. An essential and often ignored aspect of spirituality, at least in the United States currently, is becoming deeply part of one small, very small piece of a much larger puzzle, cultivating a sense of belonging to a small piece of this large planet. My hope for all of us is a deep and abiding love for one or more patches of this wondrous earth. Thank you.